Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and we are here for my LEC Winter Split Playoff Round 1 overview and analysis video. I am so excited to get this one out. We are finally in playoff mode. It is the earliest playoff that we have gotten in League of Legends history. We are only in February. We're already getting a playoff, but you know, with the LEC being 3 different splits instead of 2 now, all kind of micro splits, if you will, it's really interesting to see some playoff best of 5s already in the LEC. In this video, we're going to be covering the first 2 series to happen in the playoffs. That means the upper bracket, the winners finals, if you will, between the 2 teams that won their group and made it out of the group stage, top 2. And then the other series between the 2 teams that got second in their group to determine who the first team eliminated in 4th place will be. I'm incredibly excited to go over both of these series today. If you are excited for the video, let me know down in the comments section below. What did you think was going to happen in both of these series? Who were you cheering for and who did you expect to win? I'm really interested to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions. I know you guys have a lot of thoughts and opinions on the LEC in particular, so leave those down in the comment section below. And without further ado, let's jump into it. Of course, if you are new to my playoff videos, these are actually a little bit different. If you're only a 2023 viewer, first of all, thank you for joining me this year. I hope you've enjoyed the ride so far. But if you're joining us specifically for playoffs, my format's a little bit different for playoffs. We're not going to be going series by series. Instead, we're going to be going game by game, talking about where I think teams were able to generate advantages and where I think players let their team down. And we'll kind of be going game by game, maybe giving you a more in-depth total analysis, hopefully not racking up the video time too much, but trying to go really in-depth on where these teams go right and wrong in the best of 5. So, without further ado, let's jump right into our winners finals series. The 2 teams that won their groups. Obviously, both teams are going to survive after this series, but one will be heading to grand finals immediately. We had G2 Esports taking on Koi. Now, G2, a lot of people expected them to be here, me included. They were really solid in the regular season. They ended up finishing in 4th place just because of some botched games towards the end there. SK had a really good end to the season. Mad was hyper consistent. Vitality looked unstoppable. So it's not really a surprise to see a team like G2, who has been very good and pretty much unanimously put at the top of the power rankings by everyone since the start of the season in this spot. What it is surprising to see is Koi. Now, if I would have told you at the beginning of the split that Koi would be here, no one would be shocked and no one would be surprised. But with the way that this team played, barely making it into top 8, let alone top 4. It's pretty remarkable that they went on the run that they did, really dominatingly beating Vitality in their best of 3 to mark their spot here into the top 4, and not only that, but into the winners finals of top 4. It's a really good adjustment and really good, I guess, bounce back period for Koi, who really did struggle a lot in the regular season. It's good to see these 2 teams. Remember, this is a rematch of finals last year, and so it's not like these 2 teams are not familiar with each other, but without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the series. Remember, I predicted this to be a G2 win in 4. That was my prediction going into it in my video last week. We'll see if I get close to that. But we, of course, started off with game number 1, and game number 1 was a G2 win. G2 was able to take the first game, and they looked pretty good doing it. Their early games certainly had some question marks, but overall, they ended up being able to take the win very cleanly once they got their foot into the ground around the 10-ish minute mark. Talking about what happened in the game very quickly, Malrang was able to generate a pretty substantial lead in the early game for his team. Some really good ganks in the mid lane, a couple of early kills on caps given to Larson. I think Malrang got the first blood, but overall was able to generate a sizable lead in the mid lane and then went bot for a really nice gank on Hansama, his only death of the game. And you're up 3 kills, you're up 2k gold, you're feeling pretty good. It's like 6 minutes into the game, and Malrang is playing from ahead, and that is a huge advantage for Koi. I always talk about this. Koi, when Malrang is ahead, is a completely different animal than when Malrang is behind, where he genuinely becomes one of the worst junglers in the entire league. But this was a really good early game for Malrang, setting up the team to be in a really decent spot. However, then G2 started fighting back. Koi goes for some aggressive plays. They try to fight, you know, on the other side of the Dragon Pit in G2's jungle. That gets countered a bit with the Misfortune Bullet Time. They're able to trade, I believe, 2 for 2 in that exchange, which is pretty good for G2. And then a really good ultimate coming out from Yike around the mid lane to be able to catch a couple of players out for Koi, and then all of a sudden the gold lead is completely evened up. And that really was the story. It was then Maokai ult, Yike's ult, just dominating the game. You know, the The Maokai is an incredibly strong pick for a reason. There is a reason that I think I've been calling him the strongest jungler in the game, and that I find it atrocious when teams don't feel like they can play him. It's because when you can really take over games like this, it is unstoppable, and what we really saw was the unstoppable combination of Maokai ult and Misfortune ult, and that's going to lead to Hansama being my player of the game here. Really good game from Hansama coming out on this MF. He capitalized on the CC that G2 had in an incredible way. Broken Blade was pretty good, but it really was Yike and Hans that were really pairing up to be this dynamic duo around the map and in a lot of these team fights. If you got hit by Maokai ult and you got hit with the bullet time, you're just dead. Like, there is no outplay to that, and that happened to Larson a ton this game. That happened to Comp a ton this game. We saw it happen to Trimby a couple times this game, but Hans looked really, really good for my money. Definitely deserving player of the game, but like I said, you also got to give a nice shout out to Yike. He was really, really good in the mid game here. Fell behind a little bit early against Malrang, but Malrang, you know, gonna skip camps, gonna try and make some plays in the mid lane. Not particularly surprised by that play style, and then Yike did a really good job adjusting, bouncing back, and generating control on objectives as quickly as he possibly could in the game. The other player that I really want to give a shout out to here is Caps in the mid lane on the Jace. Suffered some losses early, was the first 2 deaths of the game, but rebounded really nicely, and by the time we hit the late game, he was solo killing the Nami on the back line of these team fights. It's absolutely huge for Caps to be able to show up. He was that secondary damage source that G2 really needed in order to make these fights a lot easier, because you're staring down a Victor Lucian who can both output a ridiculous amount of damage. If you only had the MF, you're probably not going to be able to break through Gnar and the Edge and the Nami shields nearly as quickly as you would need to be able to in these team fights. And so credit to those 3. I thought they played the best. And then for Koi on the other side, dud of the game is going to go to Trimby in the support position. This was just a really bad performance from Trimby. Obviously, the play that's going to get highlighted is whatever the hell he was doing in the bot lane when he was flanking the Hans and Mickey. I can't even begin to tell you what was going on, but Comp was running away, trying to run back to his tower, and, you know, Nami's on this gigantic route, like this flank path to try and catch up with the Nautilus Misfortune, and then the Misfortune Nautilus just killed the Lucian, because of course they do. He's by himself under tower, no Nami, and then Nami's just walking up and immediately gets rooted and just dies. Not exactly sure what that play is. Everybody's going to point to that, but he had many more mistakes than that. He was pretty poor in the early laning phase as well, and I don't know. I like Trimby. I like his Nami. I think it's his best champion, but this was not it. This was a bit of poor macro, I would say, coming out from Trimby in general. I think Larson also had a pretty poor game, was given a lot of resources early on the Victor and turned them into basically nothing. He did so little damage towards the back half of the game. He was consistently out of position in a lot of these team fights, constantly being caught out by the Maokai. He just needed to play much safer. He was looking to try and make hero plays because he saw his bot lane losing, and it wasn't going to work out. You're an immobile Victor. You're not really going to be able to avoid the Maokai or the Gragas on these engages. Hell, even the Nautilus on a lot of these engages. You're going to get caught out if you play super aggro, and that's what happened to Larson. I feel bad for Malrang. His score looks kind of bad, but he was really good in the early game. Wasn't able to do much. Zagenda won the top lane matchup, as you should do as Gnar and Gragas, but outside of that, not really a lot of positives from Koi. They had a good early game, but they fell apart really, really quickly, and their macro definitely showed some major question marks. They were going for a lot of fights that they really had no business going for, and they got punished a lot for it. As for them, they definitely need to adjust and maybe get a little bit more cautious. Either that or just go all in on this early game comp. Don't go Victor. Don't go Gnar, right? Go for this more aggressive early game style and try to be able to take over the game early so that you can close it out. If you're afraid of losing to your mid-game macro that G2 is so good at, then, you know, draft a comp that doesn't necessarily need that, like this game, like this comp specifically does. So overall, I would make some adjustments on the side of Koi, but overall, I think it was gameplay problems and not so much draft. On the side of G2, I mean, you lost early game. That's something that maybe you would want to look at, but outside of a couple of ganks, like, you rebounded really nicely. You had some fantastic engages in the mid game, most specifically Yike had some fantastic engages in the mid game. The only thing I would change is maybe put Broken Blade on something he can actually win lane on, because that was really your only weakness towards the back half of the game, was that Gnar was a little bit strong and he was making some plays. But outside of that, everything was going smooth for G2, and you're just kind of hoping you can keep it up. But that's game number 1. Only game number 1, of course. Game number 2, in my opinion, I say this all the time, is the most important game in a best of 5. If you go down 2-0, you're pretty doomed. Not a lot of teams can reliably come back from 2-0, especially against a team like G2. So this is a must-win for Koi, in my opinion. Were they able to do it, or was G2 going to take a 2-0 series lead? Well, the winner of game number 2 was G2 Esports. They are able to pick up the win here in game 2, go up 2-0, and if you thought game 1 was pretty in control for G2, this one was even worse. This was a G2 dominating stomp They were the better team and by a lot in this one. So let's go ahead and talk about it. In game one, Koi had the early game to at least fall back on. They had some early game, successes. They were up about 2k gold. They really were able to play through Malrang really strongly through the first couple of minutes of the game. It just kind of all fell apart after that when they couldn't skirmish really at all as a group. But in this one, you didn't even really get that. Yes, I guess you got first blood on Broken Blade in the top lane, but that was still kind of a failed gank. Malrang got no gold out of it, and Shigenda getting first blood isn't exactly ideal on the Cassante. And then after that, it's a gank mid that gets Caps a kill, and then it's more action in the top lane that gets Broken Blade a kill, and then it's Caps going bot lane and getting everyone a kill, and then it's a double TP that gets even more kills for G2, and then the game's over. Oops, it's like 12 minutes, and there's literally no way to win for Koi. So not a particularly good game. They did listen to me when it came to draft. They went all in on the early game. You've got the Elise Jace as your jungle mid duo. You are really trying to accelerate the pace of this game as quickly as possible. You saw that you had a good early game, and you wanted to make that kind of your main way of winning the game. However, if you don't win early on this comp, you're doomed. Like, you cannot win late on this comp. You can't go into the late game and expect Jace Lucian to be able to beat out Varus. And especially, I gotta point it out, Sejuani mid, right? Like, I get it. It's Caps. He does what he wants, especially in a best of 5. He's going to pick something absolutely ludicrous, and he's going to demolish you on it. But this Sejuani pick was gigantic for them. Not only did it create a lot of pressure early on, it allowed Bel'Veth to really snowball the mid lane, because the amount of CC that Bel'Veth now has for a gank is extraordinary going into a squishy target in Jace. I mean, Sejuani sets up ganks incredibly well. That's why she's a good jungler. And then for Bel'Veth to be able to capitalize on that, that really helps the Bel'Veth get ahead. And then also it just allows these two to kind of pair up and move around the map. This is what I talk about a lot with Mad Lions, with Aoya and Niski. This is what they like to do. Gank mid a lot in the early game, and then by 10 minutes, now you're everywhere on the map. Now these two are connected and interjoined, and they're going to be going and making plays where they need to make plays, and that's what happened in this game. A lot of it happened bot lane, but we saw a lot of plays around objectives as well, so big credit to those two players. They were definitely the driving force for G2. I'm going to give player of the game to Yike, because he was spectacular on the Bel'Veth. This champion's super fun to watch when played at a really high level by a really good player. And let's not mistake it, Yike is a very good Bel'Veth player, one of the better ones, if not the best one in the LEC right now. And so it was a joy to watch Yike get to play it. Ender actually did a really good analysis of this on the LEC desk that I want to give a shout out to, because I actually think he did a really fantastic job of why Caps has been playing a lot of these weird picks. He pulled out the Zac, the Sejuani. We've been seeing more passive picks in the mid lane coming out from Caps rather than the more carry-oriented things that we've gotten used to him from him in the past, I should say. And a lot of it has to do with making Yike feel comfortable. This is something not only G2, but a lot of top organizations have done for a very long time. I can think back to like TSM and C9 also doing this very, very well, which is when you have a group of very fundamentally sound and experienced players that can kind of go with the flow, can kind of play at a lot of styles at a relatively high level, and then you've got a rookie who you're trying to get acclimated, play to that rookie. Make sure the rookie feels comfortable, because you can trust the rest of the players to be able to make it work. I can trust Caps to go on the Engager so that Yike can play his carries in the jungle, because that's what he's good at. That's what makes him feel comfortable. And that's a great strategy, and that clearly works out for G2 here. So really good jungle mid duo, performance, I would say, overall from both of them. But Yike's going to get player of the game. Credit to Caps, though. He was phenomenal here. Hans and Mickey were really good as well, but it was all about the Bel'Veth and the Sejuani in this game for me, for G2. And then on the side of Koi, if you don't want to go down 0-2. That's not really the position you wanted to be in. Like I said, you indexed super heavily into early game, and then you lost the early game. And so from that point onwards, good luck trying to win the game. Larson was real bad. He was real bad through both of the first two games here. Not only was he way pushed up early on in the game without vision, and that really started the snowball, I would say, for the Bel'Veth, but that double teleport into the bottom lane was horrible. I mean, like, disastrously bad. I understand wanting to go to something that can be a little bit more aggressive early, but this is Larson's worst series of the year so far. It's only 2 games in, but I don't remember Larson playing like this at all in 2023, and that's not a particularly good sign. He's going to have to be better if this team is going to be able to take any games. He has been the most reliable player on Koi. I still think Trimby has probably been the best over the course of the year, but let me say it, Trimby has also been kind of bad in this series. I think Larson, Trimby, the two best Koi players, especially in the group stage, they've been the two worst players in the playoffs so far, so they're really going to need to step up if this team actually wants a chance of beating G2 in a game. But now you're down 0-2. It's no longer, all right, well, we'll see what we can do. You have to win now. There is no consolation prize. You simply have to win game number 3. It is win or go into loser's bracket. There is no secondary option. So I don't really know what you want to do with draft. I do like the idea of putting Malrang on something like the Elise, but G2 did such a good job of invading early and making sure that Elise got off to a horrible start that maybe you need to pivot into something that can just kind of be proactive. Maybe the Sejuani was the right call or something in that vein, but maybe go for something a little bit more aggressive in the mid lane, or hell, go for a carry top. I know Shigenda's not really that player, and, you know, obviously he made that statement earlier in the week that they have not practiced going for carry tops at all, but you got to do something to shake up the formula, and top lane's really been the only lane that has gone relatively okay for Koi so far in the series, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. I don't know what I would do in draft. I think I would pivot away from the Elise, maybe stick with something aggressive in the mid lane, but I don't know. Lucian Nami's not working, even though it's your best bot lane. So right now, I feel like it's just getting your confidence back. You got to play better before you draft better. And then for G2, I mean, what do you want me to say about draft? It's G2. G2 drafts are going to let them win games, right? Like, I can't tell you what G2 is going to draft, because then they're going to pull out Sejuani or Zac mid or something like that, and I'm not going to be able to predict it. Whatever they draft, they're probably going to be able to play because they are better than their opponents. G2 is a prime example of why I often on this channel say that gameplay is significantly more important than draft. You can win a game as the better team with a bad draft, and it probably will happen more often than you lose a game with a bad draft if you're the better team. Because look at G2 here. I mean, not that this draft is awful. It actually does play into some strengths, but draft, I mean, just play it. Just play it better. If you play better, you're going to win, and that's what G2 does. The mechanical skill shines through, so if they keep doing that, the series is going to be over very quickly. But is G2 going to be able to close it out in a sweep as revenge for Summer last year, or is Koi going to be able to take us to our first ever Game 4 between these two teams? Well, the winner of Game number 3 was Koi. Koi is able to win Game 3, and they keep their hopes alive for making Grand Finals from the winner's bracket here. Certainly still an uphill climb to make, but they at least won Game 3, and we're getting a Game 4 for the first time between these two teams. Obviously, they've relatively been known for best of 3s, or, you know, best of 5s that turn into best of 3s, I should say, over the past year or so. Good to see one team finally not get swept, but good for Koi to pick up this win here. It was in a pretty good fashion, kind of similar to what they did in Game 1, they just kind of actually executed on it this time. They were able to maintain the lead. Some really good early ganks from Malrang. However, Yike was actually there to, I guess you could say, punish them, but they were really attempted counter ganks that just did not go well. They were 2v2s, a couple, one in the mid lane, that was a 1-for-2. Caps ends up diving, Larson in the mid lane, tries to pick up that kill early, Malrang kind of shuts him down, Yike does end up getting it, but fails the flash over the wall and ends up giving another over, so that's a 2-for-1 in favor of Koi to start off the game, and then we get another 2v2 on the top side. Broken Blade plays super aggro up on the top side with Yike coming in for the gank. Little does he know, Malrang is shadowing, Shigenda is able to survive on like 1 HP from the Olaf, not able to kill him, and then Malrang and Shigenda, you know, coming back in after the heal are eventually able to turn that into a double kill topside. Two very, very close plays, both going in favor of Koi, and from that point onwards, the game was in Koi's hands to throw away, and they did not let it go this time like they did in game number 1. Big credit to Malrang, he played the early game phenomenally. Not only was he everywhere he needed to be, he countered Yike's gank in the mid lane, he countered Yike's gank in the top side, and really set Koi up to be fantastic, but once they got that lead, he then did a fantastic job of knowing where he needed to be able to take advantage of that in the strongest way possible. So once they got the lead, he starts invading and he kills Yike 1v1 in his jungle. Once they get the lead, he goes bot lane and he baits Hansama to step up before throwing an ultimate out and killing him. It's just play after play of accelerating the lead over and over again. This is what Malrang does at such an exceptionally high level. A fantastic game from him. He has easily been Koi's best player in this series so far. He was really good in Game 1. He was really good, and he's my player of the game here in Game 3. You have to give him a lot of credit. And I know a lot of people are going to give a lot of credit to Comp as well. He got a pentakill in this game in the final team fight that closed out the game. Credit to him, but Malrang was the reason they were in that predicament in the first place. Comp, you know, playing Sivir, eventually got online and was able to team fight really well towards the back half there, but I can't not give it to Malrang. Of course, credit to Comp. He's second in pentakills in LEC history, and that's really only like the past year and a half that has kind of totaled that up. Of course, he had some on Vitality as well, but I mean, it's mostly been Rogue and Koi Comp that has gotten a lot of these pentakills. Just kind of shows you the meta that we've been in for the past year or so, but he played well. He played safe in the early game. He knew he wasn't going to be able to contest with the Kalista Nautilus early, and he didn't want to throw away his lead, and so he scaled up. He's Sivir. He scaled up. That's what you're supposed to do on this champion, and he did it right. He eventually got to the point in the late game where his team was ahead and he could team fight front to back, and he obliterated them. He got the pentakill, and he was great. Another player you got to shout out, Shigenda here in the top lane. Obviously was really good in that early gank 2v2 in the top lane, but huge gnarls coming out later in fights, and I honestly thought he was a really good frontline tank in a lot of these fights as well. I think Shigenda's going to get a bad rap on Koi, but he's probably been this team's second best player across the series so far. Comp in there as well, but Shigenda, Malrang, and Comp are definitely stepping up for Koi. Not to say that Larson and Trimby were bad in this game. They just weren't the focal points in the same way that Shigenda, Malrang, and Comp were, and I would say that Larson and Trimby have been a little bit of a problem in their losses. But for G2 on the other side, again, it's just early aggression that doesn't go your way. It's kind of 50-50ing the game a little bit here coming from Yike. And it's the micro misplays that came out from the jungler that ended up costing G2 in that trade in the mid lane. If he's able to flash over that wall and survive and not take that extra tower shot, they actually trade 1-for-1, and it's really not all that bad. Yes, they give up first blood, but they're at least able to trade back, and you can start to get the Lilia snowballing. And then in the top lane gank, if you're able to land that E coming in onto Gnar, he just dies. Like, there is no survival coming in for him, but Yike misses it. And therefore, you have no kill on the Gnar, and therefore it's a 2-for-0 instead of potentially just being a 1-for-0. If you kill that Gnar early, I doubt Malrang is really able to get anything back there, and so not a particularly good showing from Yike. Not only was he just counter-ganked and outpathed by Malrang, but, you know, early game misplays ending up costing him, and that's just, it's unfortunate. He's a young player. He's going to make some mistakes. You know, the game didn't really mean all that much. You're still up 2-1 in the series. If you're ever going to lose a game, it's probably going to be game 3 when you're up 2-0, just because that's the one game you can probably afford to lose, but Yike definitely not with the best performance in the world. He's my dud of the game here, and it's pretty well-deserved. Caps' scoreline's pretty bad. He actually played all right, especially in the mid-game. I think he got a solo kill on Trimby randomly in the bot lane, but outside of that, he played super aggressive in a lot of these team fights, jumping in on Tristana, hoping that he can get the reset to jump back out and, you know, blow somebody up and kind of playing it like an assassin. But unfortunately, he's going into Gnar, Sejuani, Heimerdinger. Like, there's just so much CC on the enemy team that, you know, he's going to jump in, he's going to get CC'd by the Sedge, and he's going to die immediately, and that's what happened in a lot of the fights here, especially that one around the Baron pit. I distinctly remember Hans was, you know, punished for stepping up a little bit too much. Broken Blade looked okay on the Olaf, credit to him. I thought he was fine, and he was doing a lot of damage in the late game team fights, but Olaf can only do so much, and then, you know, shout out to Mickey. I thought some of the Nautilus engages were fine, but again, only so much you can do on a Nautilus when you don't have damage following it up. But overall, still just one loss for G2. Koi is going to need a couple of more in order to bounce back here. If you get one in game 4, all of a sudden this is a series. It's, you know, winner take all in game 5, but you still got to win that game 4. It is win or go home still for Koi. But for G2, you just need to win one more, and you've closed it out. You're into grand finals. You can forget about this game 3, and it's all for naught. So is G2 going to be able to bounce back, or is Koi's, you know, comeback going to start here in game number 3? Well, the winner of game number 4 was G2 Esports. They are able to take game 4, and they're able to close out the series in 4 games. This is what I predicted. I thought Koi would be able to take one with, you know, Comp, Trimby, or Malrang, or somebody, Larson, somebody popping off. In that game, it was Malrang who played really well, and of course, Shigenda and Comp also kind of stepping up. But G2 is just the better team, and I do think they proved that in this series. But this game number 4 was incredibly close. I know you can look at the stats, and you can see, it went 38 minutes. You know, 25-19. You know, that looks kind of close, but 10 towers to 3, you know, 4 dragons to 1. G2 got the only Baron. Maybe it wasn't all that close. This game was very close. In fact, Koi had a pretty strong lead in the early game, like they did for basically every game in the series outside of game number 2. A lot of action in the bot lane to start the game. I think like 3 different 3v3s in the bot lane before 6 minutes in the game. And of course, both teams were generating gold from this, but at the end of the day, you know, you're trading 2 for 2, you're trading 1 for 1, and maybe you're trading 1 for 0. You're actually kind of slowly starting to generate a small gold lead for Koi on the enemy side. They had about a 1k gold lead. A lot of that was on the bot lane. Comp and Trimby were really set up in this game to take advantage and to try and carry. And honestly, I wouldn't want anybody else on this Koi team to be set up in that position. Comp and Trimby have been the guys for this team when they've been able to win at the highest level last year, and as they've gotten their feet back on them, or under them, I should say, in the group stage here. So Comp and Trimby being given a lot of responsibility on the side of Koi. But then things start adjusting. Caps starts making some roams down bot lane, and he starts blowing up Trimby, getting 1 for 0s. You have Broken Blade really starting to take over the top lane matchup, solo killing Shigenda under the tower. A couple of really, really strong things. It ends up becoming this, you know, kind of duo matchup of Broken Blade and Caps versus Comp and Trimby, and it's just whichever carry duo is going to be able to take over these mid-game fights more. Well, unfortunately for Koi fans, Broken Blade had no answer in this game. No one was going to be able to stop the Olaf. Caps was also really good. I want to give him a shout out, but Broken Blade, easy choice for player of the game here. That Olaf was really able to take over the game. I mean, look at the enemy comp. You've got Gnar, you've got Vi, you've got Ahri, you've got Varus, you've got Kalista. Who is stopping the Olaf? Like, who is dealing with this Olaf? No one. He's going to get on the backline. He's going to be able to blow at least 2 people up every single fight without any sort of peel even being available to you. What exactly are you supposed to do? And Broken Blade took advantage of that. He won the early game pretty hard over Shigenda, who had probably his worst game of the series here. And then he was really doing a good job knowing where he needed to be, being in side lanes when he needed to, but also grouping up and being a huge influence in these 5v5 team fights. really good game from Broken Blade. Easily his best of the series. I actually thought, quite frankly, Shigenda was outplaying him before this game number 4, but Broken Blade definitely put that argument to rest in the pivotal game 4 on the Olaf, so really good game from him. And then you gotta shout out Caps. I know Hans and Mickey and Yike, their scores all look a lot better than Caps' 5, 6, and 5. Caps was certainly making some decisions on this Tristana, but not only did he show me an interaction that I wasn't aware existed, which is the fact that you can buffer Vi Ultimate with Tristana. I'm sure you've all have seen the clips by now, but he was actually really influential on being able to generate some leads back for G2 in the mid game. Without the plays that Caps was making, I don't think that G2 is actually in a position to win this game, even if Broken Blade gets super far ahead. They are, Comp and Trimby were really, really strong at the mid game point, and Caps did a really good job of knowing when he needed to go and make sure that they didn't get too far ahead, and he really was able to generate a strong lead in the mid lane, and those, fights in the late game were really, really good. Now, sometimes he was caught out for just being way too over-aggressive. I can think of multiple times where he was just, hit with Varus ult and just died, or hit with Kalista ult and just died, right? It's going to happen sometimes with Caps, especially on Tristana, but for the most part, I thought he was really good in this series and in this game in particular. So, credit to Hans, credit to Mickey. They really rebounded towards the back half of the game. Well, maybe not Mickey. He was in some places he shouldn't be on the Karma, but Hans in particular, I thought played the late game team fights well, even if he lost lane early, and then Yike, I think, rebounded well from, the crazy early game that was what happened in the bot lane. So overall, I thought G2 looked pretty good here. We'll talk about their look in the grand finals after we talk about Koi here, but Koi is now moving down to loser's bracket. It's unfortunate you lost game 4 here, but, you did show positive signs in this game and in this series. I thought Malrang and Comp in particular, your two best players, definitely showed up and played like your two best players in this series. Malrang was really good, even if he didn't exactly have the biggest impact here on this game. He went for some early plays on the Vi in the bot lane. Yike did a really good job of being able to counter those. You were still able to generate that gold lead. It was just the macro game that kind of took over once mid lane showed that, they weren't going to win. It was a little bit more difficult for Koi to be able to keep up on the map pressure, but good for Comp and Trimby. This was easily their best game of the series, and even I would say even better than their win, where it really felt like it was Malrang and Shigenda that were really doing a lot of the work, and then Comp picking up that pentakill at the end. You really want Comp and Trimby to be the best bot lane in EU. You want them to get back to the form that they were in 2022, and I think this was a much better look. Comp in particular was phenomenal in this game, solo killing Caps at multiple points in a lot of these team fights. That should not happen as a Varus into a Tristana, so very impressive stuff coming out from him. Trimby, really well-timed ultimates coming out from the Kalista. I've said it once, I will say it 100 times. Trimby is just the best ranged support player in Europe. He is the most comfortable on these types of champions. You could talk about Mickey and Hilly and, Kaiser being really good supports, but they're all engage-oriented players. Trimby's really the one that I think fits into this meta incredibly well, and I think he continues to prove that. A really good game of Kalista coming out from him. I think when you're looking at the problems here in Game 4, your mind goes to Larson, who just did nothing on this Ahri. He lost lane, he was doing 0 damage, the charms didn't matter, because you can't charm the Olaf. How are you going to peel him off? And then what? You're going to charm the Tristana? Great, sometimes you're going to be able to catch the Tristana, but Sivir's got Spell Shield, Karma's not really going to care, Maokai's really not going to care, so what exactly is the Ahri here for? I still don't know. It didn't do anything this game, and Larson, quite frankly, didn't do anything this series. Even in their win, I would consider him the most irrelevant player on that team in their Game 3 win, but in their losses, Game 1, 2, and 4, he was bad in all 3 of them. He was the most consistent player for this Koi team over the course of the regular season. To see him come in and really just underperform so much in a playoff series is definitely disappointing. I don't give dud of the series in the playoffs, but if I did, it probably would go to Larson, who just wasn't very good in this series. I think player of the series for me, it's kind of difficult. I think Caps was really good. Obviously, Hans was really good. I think I'm going to give it to Yike. I think Yike was probably the best player on G2, the player that I was most looking out for, the player that I think really caught my eye the most. I know he didn't have a particularly good Game 3, but Games 1, 2, and 4 were really strong from Yike, and I think he did a really good job setting his team up for a lot of the plays that they were able to make. But unfortunately for Koi, they're moving down the loser's bracket. They're not out yet. They still potentially have a chance to get back and face G2 again in Grand Finals if they can beat the winner of SK and Mad, which we will cover next in the video, but it's not the end of the world. You just got to get your momentum back. Hopefully, Larson can have a better series. If Malrang, Comp, and Trimby play like they did in this game against either of those two teams, they're probably going to have it in the bag. But either way, Koi is just going to be happy to be here. They've secured top 3 by winning their group, and that's much better than what they did, which was 7th in the regular season. But for G2, you're moving on to Grand Finals. You've only got 1 series left until you potentially win the first split of 2023, the Winter Split. It's a big accomplishment for a team that I think definitely expected it going into the year, so I guess you can't be too surprised, but it's still got to feel really good to finish 4th in the regular season and be the first team to qualify for finals. And that's going to bring us now to our other round 1 matchup here in the LEC playoffs. And it's a battle between 3 and 4. This is going to be the first team eliminated from top 4, the team that will finish in 4th place. Will it be Mad Lions or will it be SK Gaming? Both teams feeling very good being here. I'm not sure either team really thought they were going to be in top 4. Mad Lions, maybe. They definitely probably went into the year with the expectation of making top 4 if everything went right, and let me tell you, everything did go right for Mad Lions. They were super consistent over the course of the regular season. Probably the only team I felt super confident in going into the group stage, that they weren't just going to drop games to random teams in the group stage, and they didn't. They dropped games to G2, and that's fine, that happens, but they crushed BDS, they crushed Astralis, they beat the teams that they needed to beat, and now they're sitting here, so they're actually going to go up against a pretty surprisingly strong test and a surprise candidate coming out of Group A, and that's SK Gaming. Not only did Koi come out of that group at number 1 after beating SK, but SK ends up beating Vitality to surprise everybody and make their way into top 4. Vitality, who felt like a lock after the regular season with how well that top side was playing. Their bot side very much let them down, and that is the problem that SK has not run into this year, with Exakick and DOS being maybe the best bot lane in the LEC over the course of the regular season. You can make a really strong case that Exakick has just simply been the best AD carry in Europe this year, and I guess I can only speak from personal experience, but I certainly didn't see this coming, and I can't imagine a lot of other people saw this coming. So this matchup becomes very interesting. It's all about, can Mad Lions' consistency and can their jungle mid overcome the strength that SK's bot lane has been, while they've also had a pretty good jungler in Marcoon. So my prediction was SK in 5, but I said my swing here was SK in 5, Mad in 5. I think this is going to be an incredibly close series. I think both teams are very evenly matched, and it's going to be really interesting to see which side can come out on top. But we're going to have to kick that off with going over game number 1. And game number 1 was a Mad Lions win. They jump out to a 1-0 series lead, and that's big. Game 1's a big tone setter, I would say, for the series overall. Of course, not the end-all, be-all. You can always win 3 games in a row after this to just win the series, but winning game 1 definitely gives you the kind of confidence that you need to go into the rest of the series to feel good about yourselves, and Mad Lions did that very well in this game. It was a relatively slow 32-minute win for Mad overall. Early on in the game, Mad definitely had a game plan, I would say, overall, which was target the top lane, target Irrelevant, target this Gnar, try to dive him a couple of times. The first time you try, Marcoon does a really good job actually counter-ganking and answering it and picking up first blood for SK Gaming. The second time, didn't go so good. JCL, Yoya, Niski, 3-man top, Irrelevant had no answer. He ends up dying. All of this comes out to a slight Mad lead, but honestly, not something that is insurmountable by any means for this SK Gaming team, until the solo lanes start popping off. You get a solo kill on top side with Chasey killing Irrelevant. You get a solo kill mid lane with Niski killing Certus. And all of a sudden, this Mad lead starts to snowball out of control. You do have Oyoya doing a really good job managing objectives and managing jungle pressure that I always talk about on the channel. I will admit, from this point onwards, the game does kind of slow down a bit. It becomes very objective-based. It becomes very map control-y because Elyoya is just taking everything and SK doesn't want to fight for it, which personally, I don't think is the right move. I don't really think you're going to be outscaling Civ or Cassante, but, you know, whatever. If you don't think you're in a position to fight right now, don't fight. But you have full AP Gragas coming in. You've got EU Jace in the mid lane. There's a lot of problems that I think, you know, team fighting towards the back half of this game leads for SK, and I definitely think that ended up becoming a problem. Eventually, Mad Lions just pulls the trigger. They're, you know, posturing, I would say, around Dragon Pit, bot side River, and Chasey with a fantastic teleport and a fantastic flank that basically wipes the entirety of SK. Irrelevant does his best to try and get some back. I think he gets a double kill in that fight there, but you know, it's not enough. It's not enough. Mad Lions basically from that point onwards just owns the game and ends up winning. Chasey is going to get my player of the game here for Mad Lions. Really, really good game from him. He has really stepped it up ever since the regular season ended, or the best of ones ended. Best of threes, he was really good. Best of five so far, he was really good in this game. I know a lot of people are going to want to give player of the game to Niski, and I understand that. I'll talk about that in a second, but they don't win this game without Chasey. They don't win the game without his frontlining ability. They don't win the game without his ability to dominate his lane and really make Gnar a lot weaker in the late game. And also, obviously, his positioning in these team fights is nearly perfect. It's something that I really have praised him for over the past few weeks. Is as good as his laning is, he is a team fight focused top laner, and I think it really helps out this Mad Lions team who wants to spend their pressure elsewhere early on in games. So Chasey looking fantastic, Niski looking really good. I mean, Niski just might be the MVP of the Winter Split. Obviously, they're not giving out an MVP for Winter Split, but Niski is right up there with basically anybody else for how important he was to his team compared to anyone in the league, and he showed that again in this game. Yes, there were a couple times where he was overextended, and he got caught, basically for no reason. Exekick was really good with his ultimates this game, but the damage and the pressure that Niski was putting on the enemy team on this Zoe pick that not a lot of people are really bringing out right now, incredibly impressive and really fun to see for Mad. So those were the two players that you have to highlight. Everybody played well in this game, but the solo laners in particular, definitely the shining stars. As for SK, on the other side, not really the way you wanted Game 1 to go. This is a comp that really does want to win early. Outside of the Elise into Gragas, you really don't have anyone that's going to outscale the opponent. Gnar can be a problem in the late game, and so can Varus, but you're going into Sivir with a Karma, with a Cassante, with a Zoe. Like, you're not really going to be able to survive a lot of these teamfights. They have so much DPS, and your mid laner is Jace, and I hate to say that, but that is a problem in the late game in terms of how you're going to play this out. And it became a problem not only in the late game, but in the early game as well, because Certus, quite frankly, just didn't play this game all that well. Jace is quite hard to pilot, especially into something like a Zoe in the mid lane, and so I can understand where Certus struggled, but getting solo killed so early on in the game really made it difficult for SK to have any pressure. I talked about Mad really controlling the map and controlling the tempo of the game. A lot of that was through mid lane, was Niski roaming, and Certus just not being able to match because he just did not have the pressure. I think with a bit of a better mid lane performance here, this game could have gone a little bit differently, but unfortunately, SK wasn't able to win that. Irrelevant got targeted heavily early on in the game and was honestly on track to be done in the game pretty easily, but he actually had some really good team fights. He was the only player on the team that I thought was playing well towards the back half. Exekick was certainly making some really good ultimates, but he was doing 0 damage towards the back half of these fights, and then Marcoon was literally running it as AP Gragas. So not really a lot of positives to take away for SK. It just very much felt like they tried to make some plays in the early game to counter gank Mad and, to sit there and try and, last the first 3 minutes of the game, and then once they survived that, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to go. They didn't know what kind of pressure to have, and every lane just kind of collapsed. And so, not a particularly good showing, I would say, for SK. Hopefully, they can look better in the games leading up to the rest of this series, but for Mad, this is exactly how you want to open up the series. I mean, this was great from your solo laners. Your bot lane didn't really have to do too much, which I think is the best version of Mad, and now Yoya got to play an early game jungler that generated a lead, and then controlled the game and the pace from there on, which is what he's really good at. So, I think basically everything here played into Mad's strengths, and you're really just hopeful that they can continue on with that for the rest of the series, but are they going to be able to? Or is SK going to pull this back, make it 1-1, make it a real series? Well, Game 1 was a pretty strong win for Mad, so we're going to have to see if SK can keep their mental and rally and react to this. They really haven't had a lot of problems, I would say, over the course of the year. It's going to be interesting to see if they can rebound here. Well, we're going to see in Game number 2, which is coming up right now, and the winner of Game number 2 was SK Gaming. They are able to take Game 2. They're able to even up the series at 1-1, and they're able to make this something of a series in and of itself. I'm very excited to see them win this. Obviously, going down 0-2 is not exactly where you want to be. I just talked about that in the previous series, so for SK to be able to pick up the win here, you're really excited to see that, and do it in such a positive and dominant way is a really good sign. I mean, they weren't looking all that good in Game 1. They looked very passive. They looked like they didn't really know what to do when playing from behind. But in this game, they really were able to generate their own lead, and they were really able to do something with it. So big credit to them. Let's start talking about it. What happened in this game? Well, early on in the game, they kind of split the maps. SK spending a lot of time topside, making sure that Chasey isn't in nearly the same kind of predicament that he was in Game number 1, where he was able to generate a big lead on the Cassante. They want to make sure this Gnar actually gets in the game, and Irrelevant does a really good job getting ahead for SK. First of all, generating a small lead for SK, but Mad, on the other hand, trying to play for bot lane. They really want to try and dive bot. They try and 4-man it. They do end up getting the double kill, but Exekick does a really good job trading one back on the side of SK, and then Certus tries his best to come and clean stuff up, but they do a good job backing out of that. After all is said and done, when you've got the top and bot trades, you're looking at a slight lead, probably a 1.5k gold lead for SK, and Irrelevant being particularly strong on the top side. Carzzy did get a bit of gold, but Exekick also got some gold in that dive as well. And then we start getting into the mid game. We start getting into some more long form fights, some stuff here or there. Exekick really starts popping off on the Zeri. His positioning in a lot of these is perfect. The Mad Lions really start trying to target Zeri and really start trying to make sure that she can't do a lot, but they over-invest into trying to take down Zeri. She's hypermobile, can jump over a wall, can keep herself safe, can deal a lot of damage, and Mad Lions ends up kind of trapping themselves in a lot of scenarios where they're going after the Zeri, they get caught, and they get punished for it, and then SK's lead starts to grow from there, and then we start getting more active 4v4s and 5v5s around major objectives, and Irrelevant starts popping off. Some fantastic plays from him. Obviously, the main one that comes to mind is the bot lane play where he's, shoving in a side lane. They go to try to gank him. He survives on like maybe 12 HP and ends up killing Chasey and gets out. Huge play from him, a huge outplay overall from Irrelevant. He was awesome this game, and then you hit the late game where my player of the game really steps in, Certus, who was phenomenal once we get to the back half of this game. It took a little bit for the Akali to get online. You wouldn't typically say that once we hit like 25 minutes, the Akali was now stronger than the Kassadin. That's not something I would typically say, but Certus played the back half of this game so well after being relatively passive in the early game. Not necessarily what I would recommend you do in this matchup as Akali, but this is his signature champion for a reason, or at least the signature one that's in meta. Sorry, LeBlanc. But, this is what he plays. He plays assassin characters like this at a ridiculously high level, and he has all split long. Anytime he's gotten his hands on these melee assassins, he dominates on them. I understand the Jace idea in game 1 because you can play him like that, but Akali really is his bread and butter, and he showed that off in game number 2. A really fun player of the game performance. And then, like I said, I also have to give big props to both Irrelevant and Exakick, who were both phenomenal in this game. Irrelevant with the outplay of the tournament so far, with him, dodging that bot lane gank. Really, really fun to watch. Him doing a really good job, generating this gigantic lead over Chasey in the top lane. I think by the end of the game, he had like a 4 or 5k gold lead by himself over his opponent in the top lane. Really, really good stuff coming out from Irrelevant. And then Exakick's positioning is just so brilliant. He knows when to be aggressive. He knows when to be passive. It is really insane when you watch like top level AD carries play champions like Zeri, who do have tools to be able to self-peel, because they can play so aggressive in some of these fights. And you're like, how do they get away with it? And then the moment the enemy tries to capitalize, he is like brain instant, I can get myself to safety. It is incredibly impressive gameplay, and this is peak SK. This is what we wanted to see when it came to the best of 5s. This was a really good performance. As for Mad Lions, nobody really did all that well. Carzzy was able to generate some gold early, but it was at the expense of kind of trading gold with Exakick, and so both of you were generating, and that's usually not particularly good for the Lucian into Zeri. You were really hoping that Niski would eventually get online as the Kassadin, but Certus was way more important towards the back half of the game. Chasey got run over in the top lane, and my dud of the game in Elyoya had no impact. I'm tired of seeing this Vi into Sejuani. I've talked about this on the channel so many times. You have to be the better team in order to pick Vi. Vi is not a champion that functions if you are playing from even later in the game. It's just not true. Vi goes in with the ultimate, lands it on somebody, and immediately gets blown up. It is a 4v5 with 2 seconds of CC coming out from Vi, and you have to hope that that's enough. You don't even really have a lot of follow-up on this team. You're hoping the Kassadin can get in, you're hoping Cassante is maybe on a flank, but outside of that, like, let's say you ult on the backline Zeri here, what do you do if she just runs away and the rest of the team starts peeling? You do nothing, you die, and the team fight's over. So I'm tired of seeing Vi as a response to Sedge. I'm tired of seeing Vi as a response to Zeri. It really doesn't work in the way that people think it does at the highest level, because players know how to play against it now. And so Elyoya with basically no impact on the game. His early ganks didn't work. He had to give up a ton of pressure in the mid game, and the Vi pick really did not come in clutch. But Chasey also kind of got bodied in the top lane. So either of them, I guess, could be dud of the game. But for me, it's going to go to Elyoya on the Vi. I think overall, 1-1, you don't want to pull the trigger yet. Obviously, game 1 was super good for you, and I think draft was definitely at your disadvantage for game 2 here. You want to go for something that gives you a little bit more scaling. This seems like a series where both teams are going to want to try to get into the mid to late game a little bit more than maybe what we saw in G2 versus Koi. So maybe not, go for Lucian Nami. And I like Lucian Nami, but maybe be willing to prioritize the Zeri first, or even something like the Sivir, which we saw be used at incredible effect earlier in the week. And so those are things that I can consider. Kassadin's fine, but I don't think it plays to Niski's strengths. I'd like to see him on something that can be a little bit more proactive in the mid game, which Kassadin just can't be. And then take this edge for yourself. Elyoya is so freaking good at it. As for SK Gaming, this is what you want to see. Certus on comfort, Marcoon on comfort, Exakick on comfort. Everybody kind of playing what has gotten them to this point. That's how you win games, is play what you're good at, and SK has really realized that. This is the reason they're in the top 4, and they are proving that they belong here right now in this series. I'm just hoping they can keep it up, but that's to be determined now in game number 3. Game 3, huge for this series. Whoever takes a 2-1 series lead is heavily advantageous, I think is what I should probably say, is heavily advantageous as we move further on into the series because you only got to win one of the final two as opposed to both of the final two. So who's going to take that advantage? Who's going to take the lead here in game number 3? Well, the winner of game number 3 was Mad Lions. They are able to take game 3, and they're able to take a commanding 2-1 series lead here. They are up on SK, and they're looking good while doing it. Really, really like what I've seen from this team so far. This series has been kind of interesting, a little bit back and forth, but in my opinion, this is the most dominant game of the series yet. Games 1, 2, while they were definitely controlled by one of the respective teams, I would say here it very much felt like only Mad at any point in the early game had a chance to win. Yes, SK got first blood. Really good play by Marcoon. A really good flash to be able to block Elyoya's escape pattern. They're able to pick that up in the bot lane. Really good first blood from them. But then, Marcoon plays so safe in the early game. Plays mostly top side. Doesn't try to push his advantage bot lane. He knows that Mad has to be going bot lane because look at their comp. It's Jace top into Ornn. You're not really going to gank that. And then you got a Gragas mid into a Nazir. You're not going to gank that. And you've got a freaking Draven in the bot lane. You know he's going to be bot side, so why are you top side the whole part of like the 1 to 4 minutes of the game? Don't really understand that. But then, Elyoya does go bot, like we all thought he would, and he gets Carzzy gold, and then the game's over, because it's Draven with gold, and it's really, really frustrating to watch if you're, trying to root for a balanced series, because it just doesn't make any sense for Marcoon to not be bot lane. He eventually does go bot lane, but by that point, you've already got first blood, or not first blood, but gold on Draven, and you've got a Nautilus facing against a Lucian Nami. If you get on any of them first, it's doomed, and that's basically what happens. Marcoon goes to gank bot, and Carzzy and Hylissang basically just win the 2v3. Elyoya shows up late and is able to help clean up, but Carzzy and Hilly are so far ahead at that point. Draven's got gold. The game is now over. Carzzy has won the game. My player of the game is not going to go to Carzzy. I know that's going to surprise some people because, the Draven did carry in terms of the damage, but how can I not give player of the game to Hylissang? Those hooks were on point. I can't even remember if he missed a hook this game. If he did, it was certainly not a consequential one. Every single team fight, every single early game skirmish, like Hilly was there and playing at a high level. This is what I want to see. I understand that we're not in a meta where engaged supports are all that good, and you know me, I'm pro Enchanter support right now. As much as I like watching engaged supports, I just don't think they are optimal right now. I think that you're putting yourself at a disadvantage by playing them early, but not if the enemy team's going to give your Draven gold. Like, come on. Like, that's a no-brainer. If you feel like you're the better support, go out there, play Nautilus, at least limit test. In a 1-1 series where if you lose, you still get another shot, I do like the idea of pulling out something like the Nautilus and making it work. We saw Mickey playing it really well in the previous series, and so don't call it a comeback, but Nautilus is really popular in the LEC. What a big shock. None of the good supports in the LEC play Enchanters, but, credit to Hylissang. He played it at a high level, and he was really good. Carzzy did a great job following up on it. Both of them were really, really solid, and quite frankly, the reason that Mad Lions was able to win this game. You can give a lot of credit to Elyoya for being in the right place at the right time, but what are you going to do, not gank Carzzy and Hylissang? Like, you know what I mean? You're not going to gank the Draven. It was pretty obvious that it was coming. And then you got to give a ton of credit to Niski. I mean, the BM coming out from this Gragas towards the back half of the game. Not only were the ultimates huge, he was able to pick off a couple of people a couple of times. A big ultimate hit Marcoon, I believe, around 20-ish minutes, and then, obviously, in the final fight, he was able to get Irrelevant into the backline, and they blew him up basically instantly, and then there's no front line. There was no way to peel off for Azir and Lucian, and they just have no way to fight you towards the back half of the game. Niski's ultimates were huge, flexing Gragas to the mid lane, Jace to the top lane. It's a really cool idea, so long as your mid laner can play it. Obviously, the memory that's going to live in people's minds from Niski for this game was him, not recalling with the rest of his team topside, getting chased down, and then just ulting his way out, and then BMing for like a solid 5 seconds against SK. It's very, very funny. I recommend you go watch it. I don't have a timestamp for you, but it's near the end of the game. They have Baron. Really, really funny, but honestly, Mad was just better. Like, they won in every aspect. Chasey won top lane, and the Jace was doing a ton of damage towards the back half of the game. Elyoya was exactly where he needed to be. Niski was hilarious towards the back half of the game and super impactful on the Gragas. And then Carzzy and Hilly won the game for the Mad Lions. They looked fantastic here. As for SK Gaming, not good. You got destroyed here. Marcoon is especially egregious in how he played the game mentally, just because, where were you, dude? How did you not know you were going to get 3v2'd bot at level 3? Like, we all saw this coming, and the casters saw it coming. They talked about it. I saw it coming. I'm sure you watching this video saw it coming. Why were you topside? What are you doing? Farming on Wukong? I don't understand. You know what I mean? It seemed like such an obvious play. He made some good plays outside of that. Some of the engages really weren't bad if they were playing from neutral, but they weren't playing from neutral, so they ended up losing. My dud of the game, I should say, isn't going to go to Marcoon, though, because I do think he made some solid engages at the very least. It's going to go to Certus, who, again, gets taken off of this melee assassin mid and just doesn't do anything, right? He gets to play Azir in this game, and he hugs his turret. He gets absolutely blasted by Niski on Gragas in lane, and, you know, credit to Certus, I don't actually think he was down that much. Like, he was relatively neutral in gold, but Niski was never in lane, so of course he was relatively neutral in gold. The fact that he was down in CS, even when Niski was roaming all over the map, I guess that's a testament to how good Niski was laning, but more of a testament to how bad Certus was laning in this game. So, not really a lot of good things to say about SK in this one. They kind of got blown out. This was even worse than game number 1. I do think you got to make some adjustments here. If you don't want to play for early game, don't play for early game. Stop trying to contest things at level 6 if you're down against a Draven if you don't want to fight early. Like, I don't understand where the memory disconnect is here. If you want to scale. If you want to play for Ornn, Azir, Wukong in the late game with team fights with Lucian, you know, kind of being that secondary carry, do that. That's perfectly fine. Don't give Draven kills and play the early game really slow. But if you're gonna go aggressive, you have to be able to deal with the fact that the enemy team is probably also gonna go aggressive. And it just didn't feel like SK was ready for that in this one. So definitely frustrating there. For Mad Lions, just keep this up, man. Like, your talent's proven through. Carzzy and Hilly had a great game. Elyoya and Niski are awesome to watch, and Chasey, when he gets ahead, is fun as well. Mad genuinely just looks like the better team right now. But remember, SK won game 2 in pretty dominant fashion. We know that they can pick a game up here and there. I just need them to be able to draft and play to their win con a tad bit better here, because taking early engages and giving gold to the Draven just wasn't the win con. So I definitely think this game could be taken to a game 5, or the series could be taken to a game 5, but SK is going to have to show some improvement to do that. So are they going to be able to do it, or is it going to be just like the previous series where it ends in 4? Well, the winner of game number 4 was SK Gaming. They do win game 4, and they are going to take us to a game number 5. That's what I really wanted to see. Silver Scrapes, at least in one of these series here, and we get it with SK being able to pick up the win here. It wasn't the cleanest in the early game, certainly some problems from a couple players, but another couple of players really showing why they deserve to be considered among the league's best in terms of teams. And so let's go ahead and get talking about it, shall we? Starting off with a bad play that SK made to start the game. Marcoon going for a way over-aggressive early invade early on, gets caught out by Elyoya, gets caught out by Niski, gets caught out by Hylissang. He ends up giving over first blood and flashing over. Not a particularly good start for an Elise, who really needs that early lead to be generated for herself. Luckily, Carzzy goes complete brainless mode at some point in the bot lane. He spots a potential kill on the Aphelios, and he goes all in with basically 0 health under his tower. He ends up not being able to pick up the kill. I joke around, but it is pretty close. It is relatively possible for Carzzy to be able to pick up the kill here, but he's just barely not able to do it through the Lulu shields, and Exakick does end up getting some gold back for that. Carzzy and Hilly do a really good job of trading that back. They play really aggressive to try and punish this Aphelios early during the time period where he should be punishable. They notice that Lulu has been gone in the bot lane, so they go all in. Exakick almost turns it into a 2v1, but at the end, he's just not able to do it. Carzzy's able to pick up that kill, and you start getting into this mid-game where it's like, okay, well, Mad's not really in that bad of a spot. And then the team fights start. Certus and Irrelevant start taking over. Certus with a great ult on Niski in the mid lane with the Azir, and he's able to push him back. He's able to generate a kill there. Then all of a sudden there's a little skirmish, a 3v3 skirmish down bot side, and Exakick completely pops off. Oops, now gold's on Aphelios. He's accelerated. Here we go. Irrelevant on the top side has started becoming a problem on the Scion, becoming relatively unkillable. And while Marcoon is still making some bad plays and getting killed by the Lucian, at least you're in a position now where your carries are online. And then you start getting into the 5v5 skirmishes around objectives, and that's when things really break out for SK. Gotta give credit to Exakick. He is an easy choice for player of the game here. This Aphelios game genuinely was terrific. It was a blast to watch, and he really is the most promising AD carry in the region. I know we can talk about, maybe he's not the best right now, although I think he's certainly making a case to be, but you know, I mean, he really is the kind of player that could be the best AD carry in the region for the next, like, 5 years, right? Like, he's got that kind of talent. He is phenomenal at the game of League of Legends, whether it's at early game, really aggressive champions like Lucian that want to punish the mid game, whether it's, you know, late game hyper carries like the Zeri and Aphelios, whether it's safe ADCs like the Ezreal and the Xayah. It just feels like Exakick can do whatever he wants, and he can play it all at a high level, and that's super impressive. You know, I don't want to say too much because, you know, someone's career could always go up or down, and confidence and motivation and, you know, all that stuff plays a lot of, you know, it plays a lot into the factor of whether or not somebody is going to be a legend in the industry or not. But if anybody has the tools in the past few years that I've seen from an AD carry in Europe, it's Exakick. He really can be something special. Him and Doss really, really good together. Dot's had a very good game on the Lulu, especially towards the back half. This Aphelios was basically a tank with how much he was healing, and the Lulu shields going into the back half of the game. We watched that moment where, I think it was Chasey dive on to Exakick in I think it was the last fight of the game in their base, and he's just like drain tanking through all the damage that this K'Sante can do, and it's hilarious to watch, but yeah, I mean, that's just the power of Exakick. It's the power of Aphelios when you do get ahead. A champion that, go on Reddit, everybody will tell you is completely useless. Of course, Reddit's wrong because Aphelios is still pretty good. He just takes a while to get online. Once he gets online, he's still Aphelios. So, still a pretty decent pick, just a situational one. Certus was also really good in this. Good game, bad game, good game, bad game. He has a good game on his Azir. That's a good sign. It's not Akali and it's not LeBlanc, so that's a good sign that Certus was good. Those ultimates in particular were really good, but the damage he's able to output in a lot of these team fights as that secondary damage stealer. Mad Lions spent a lot of resources trying to get this Aphelios dead in a lot of the fights, and sometimes they succeeded, but other times, even when they succeeded, oops, the Azir's just untouched, killing your entire backline. Also want to give a ton of credit to Irrelevant, was really good at that frontline tank role. He gets a solo kill basically on Karzi under their tier 2 tower, which is super funny to watch. Almost picks up 2. Actually, maybe it was Elyoya, not Karzi. It was one of the two, but he almost picks up a double basically by himself in a 1v4, which is really, really funny to watch. But he continues to be, you know, one of the most underrated players in the LEC. I remember getting a comment, I don't remember, like a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, maybe it was the preseason video about Irrelevant where it was essentially like, you know, I like Irrelevant, but I don't understand how you can put him as high as you did because he is just a career weak side top laner. He's never going to be able to win you games. And I was like, man, I just don't think we're watching the same. I don't think we're watching the same top laner. Going back and watching those Misfits games, he was the reason they won quite a few of them, and he didn't get nearly the same kind of credit he deserved on that Misfits team last year. I'm glad to see he's finally starting to get a bit of that credit on an SK team that really is overperforming again, just like Misfits did last year, this year. So Irrelevant's really good. I told everybody at the beginning of the year, I'm just glad people are finally starting to catch up. As for Mad Lions, I mean, you looked really good in Game 3. You didn't look that bad in this game. Certain moments were really good. Niski was split pushing on the Victor. He was matched by the Aphelios. Very, very funny kind of statement to be made there, but unfortunately, only so much you can do. Niski did a good job trying to keep the macro in play for Mad Lions. Was doing a ton of damage in teamfights, but you just don't have the peel here to keep him alive long enough. Karzi was good if he didn't make some stupid positioning errors. If he didn't give gold to X-Kick early in the game, perhaps this could have gone a tad bit differently. If you got the Lucian really snowballed and the Aphelios never got online, perhaps this game goes a lot different, but fortunately, that's not Karzi and Hylissang. That's not how they're going to play the game. So, and then, unfortunately, my dead of the series, or my dead of the game, has to go to somebody. It's going to go to Chasey up in the top lane on the K'Sante. He didn't play particularly bad. He didn't make any huge, giant mistakes. I just can't remember a positive play that he made this game. He was, you know, for lack of a better word, irrelevant in a lot of the moments in this game, and he ended up not really being able to do anything towards the back half. He wasn't tanky enough to be able to tank Aphelios and Azir, and he didn't do enough damage to be able to actually kill either of them either, even if he got on them. He tried to go for some solo kills on Irrelevant multiple times up in the top lane, but they never ended up working out, because guess what? You can't kill Sion. He's really freaking hard to kill. So, overall, not a good game for Mad Lions, but definitely something you can bounce back from. Definitely not something that is unwinnable in Game 5. You just got to get back to your roots. Game 5, you just got to get back to how you played in that Game 3 and that Game 1. And now you're on Blue Side. Blue Side's undefeated in this series, 4-0. So, theoretically, Mad Lions has this in the bag. Is that going to be true? Well, we're going to find out as we move now into our Silver Scrapes, Game number 5. So, who's going to win it? Who's going to be eliminated? And who's going to move on to face Koi in our semifinals? Well, the winner of Game 5 and the winner of the series is Mad Lions. They are able to pick up the Game 5 win, and guess what, Mad Lions fans? You won a best of 5. I know that's gotta feel good. I know you haven't done it in so long that it's gotta feel good, but you did it. You won a best of 5 for the first time since 2021. And look where you are now. You're in the quarterfinals, the top 3 of the LEC. Props to SK. They really pushed them in this series, in this game, but Mad Lions comes out on top. But what ended up happening here in game number 5? How did we end up getting here? Well, very interesting draft on blue side for Mad. Not only do they go for the Jace Gragas, you know, double flex again here with the early prio on Elise, but you go for the Tristana Rel bot lane. Not really what I expected to see here at all, if I'm being entirely honest. You know, as good as I think Tristana is, it's not really something I expected to see in a win-or-go-home Game 5 for your team. You're out of the split if you lose this, and to pick it in a Lucianami is very bold, but lucky, Hilly's really freaking good at Rel and really freaking good at Engagers. I get it. It's an Enchanter meta. I've talked about it a lot. Don't play Engagers, yada, yada, yada. Hylissang's not a normal support. Hylissang should not take any advice from anyone, clearly, because he goes on the Rel here and he pops off. SK does get first blood in the 2v2 bot. They're able to pick off Karzi, who just plays way too overeager in the first part of the game. Going into that Lucianami, you're not going to be able to trade early, especially if Rel is not in a perfect position to be able to disengage. But Mad do a really good thing, and they answer top lane. They put a lot of pressure into this Jace. They really want to make sure that this Elise Jace duo can be super online. And you know what? Great call. I think this is really perfect. If you get the Renekton behind, he's really not going to be all that useful towards the back half of the game. Hell, even the mid part of the game, which we definitely saw. So you ended up gaining a lot of pressure top, even if bot wasn't necessarily in a perfect spot. But then you just start going, okay, well, if we can get bot in a neutral spot, then we're fine. So they go for the 3v3 bot. They see Marcoon come down, try to I guess, push Exakick and Dawes forward because they know that's their biggest win condition in this game. But Hylissang does a phenomenal job of peeling off all of the damage basically coming out from Exakick, and then Elyoya shows up to finish it off, and they end up winning this 3v3. I believe they get all 3 kills. Maybe they only get 2, but at the very least they got 2 kills, and now Karzi's online, Hilly's really strong, Elyoya's done his job, and then it's all just up to the power duo of Elyoya and Niski to take over the map in the mid game like they did. They were making plays bot. They were making plays mid. They were making plays at Dragon. They were making plays at Herald. They were making plays top lane where they continued to dive Irrelevant, who just could not catch a break in this game. But Elyoya and Niski, this is what they do. They generate a lead and then they're out on the map. This is Mad Lions. This is how they like to play the game, and they specialize in it, and they brought it out here in the game 5, and there was nothing that SK could do to stop it. Now, it wasn't perfect. SK did a really good job in the later half of the mid game, I would say around like 20 minutes, to pull back in a lot of these fights. A couple of really good picks on Karzi, on Chasey. They were able to get Elyoya once, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is like a 2k gold deficit. Like, we can genuinely win this. And they start Baron. They want to pressure Baron. They want to force Mad Lions to come in and try and fight them, because Lucian's strong right now, and Sejuani can really do a lot, and you really don't want to poke your head against a Zoe. So there's an opportunity here for SK to regain the lead in this game, but they overcommit to the fight around Baron. After they start it, they go all in to try and get some kills, and they end up getting turned on. I believe it's like a 4 for 2, and then all of a sudden Mad Lions regain their lead. It's all thrown away at that play. They get Baron. They're able to push out every lane, and from that point on in the game, it's no longer close. I gotta point out my player of the game, Hylissang. I know I've already talked about how amazing his peel was in the early game to make sure that Karzi got ahead, but some of the engages that he made towards the back half of this game, genuinely unbelievable. Like, this was top tier rel play, some of the best engaged play that I've seen in a very long time. I'm not going to sit here and try to, tell you that Rel's combo is the hardest thing to pull off in the entire universe, but to get 4 or 5 people multiple times this game, that's impressive. And to do it so consistently and not really ever put yourself in that much danger doing it, Hylissang is just the master at being able to take over games when you take him off the leash. It's really, really fun to see him on this Mad Lions team. Now, it's not all positive because Karzi was on this team, and, Malphite Rel bot lane really looking good, but I don't know, man. I don't know what gets into Karzi sometimes. He just feels like he has to attack everybody in melee range as Tristana, and it doesn't always work out. Karzi tried his best to throw the lead, was definitely mispositioning a lot of the mid game. SK was coming back mostly thanks to Karzi mispositioning and not capitalizing on Hylissang's great plays, but it's okay. You got a great support, you got a great jungler, you got a great top, you got a really good mid. Everybody's working here. Everybody's, making sure that you're all right. So Karzi's attempts to throw game 5 ended up not mattering. Mad Lions ends up taking it, and they look great doing it. Big credit to Chasey, taking that Jace in the top lane. Niski looks awesome on the Gragas. He had another fadeaway ult to kill somebody in this game towards the back half. It's just so much fun to watch Mad Lions play. They are a blast, and their style of just be everywhere on the map and control the tempo is a blast to watch. As for SK, it sucks that you're out here. I really like this team, but 4th place? Like, that's pretty freaking good considering most people thought you were going to be bottom 3, bottom 4 at best, I think, heading into the year. Some people had you bottom 2. I saw that in the power rankings, and I had faith in this team, but even I didn't think they were going to be anywhere near top 4. So, I mean, what a start to the year for you. You still got a lot to build on. Exakick and Dawes might be the best bot lane in Europe right now. I mean, they certainly have the potential to be, but they're playing at such a great level. Certus really unlocked a different part of himself in this split. He didn't have the best of games in the losses, but he had moments in this series and all throughout the year where he looked like one of the better mids in the entire region. Marcoon has proven that he is an elite level jungler. He has proven it. He proved it last year. He's proving it again this year. People aren't going to listen until you prove it at the highest stage. I think he's getting very close to doing that. And then Irrelevant, I already talked about how I think he's a little bit undervalued. Don't take this game into account. He was camped into oblivion. He was like 3-man topped like 7 times. So, try to ignore that. But I think this team will be fine. Even if Irrelevant wasn't very good here, I still think that they're going to be solid. Do I think they're going to be top 4 moving forward? I don't know, man. There are a couple teams in the LEC that simply have to be better next split. And I don't know if they are, but you have to assume that they will be. So I hope that SK is going to be able to keep it up, but if Exakik, Certus, DOS, Marcoon, even Irrelevant, if they all continue developing and get even better and continue to grow into some of the best players in their role in the region, this team's going to be dominant for a long time, and they shouldn't let their 4th place finish here in Winter stop them from feeling that. But for Mad, you're in top 3. You've made it. One more series, and you are in the finals, but you now have to go up against Koi, a very difficult proposition. I'll talk about that once we get into kind of the final slide here, but big credit to Mad Lions. They finally win a best of 5, get the little monkey off their back in terms of that little curse that's going on. Elyoya and Niski as a duo finally win a best of 5, and I feel really happy for them. They have played so well all year long, and this really does feel like the just desserts that they deserve. All right, that is going to do it for my LEC Winter Playoffs Round 1 overview and analysis of both of the series. Only 2 remain, and we're going to be doing a video for each of them individually. It's time to preview Koi versus Mad Lions. I actually think this is a very interesting series. Obviously, winner goes on to face G2 in the grand final. So what do I think is going to happen? Well, originally, I predicted Koi to be able to take down SK relatively easily in 4 or 5 games, but Mad's a little bit different. I think Mad actually matches up against Koi a little bit better, if I'm being entirely honest. They can take advantage of some of the mistakes that Koi has been making. If Elyoya can generate some early leads against Malrang, I think that could be a big problem for this Koi team, and so I'm going to pick Mad Lions to win this in 5. I do think my spread, I always do a 2-game spread, or a 1-game spread, I guess you could say. Mad in 5, Koi in 5. I do think it is relatively back and forth, but I'm going to plant my flag in the Mad Lions camp right now. I think they're going to be able, now that they've finally gotten that monkey off their back, they finally won a series, I think they're going to be able to take down Koi, and I think we're going to be seeing a really interesting matchup between G2 and Mad Lions, harkening us back to 2021, but that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, let me know down in the comments section below. Do you agree with my take that Mad's going to beat Koi, or do you think that Koi's got it in the bag and I'm incredibly wrong? Let me know not only how you feel about that, but how you felt about both of the series we talked about in this video down below. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. It really does mean a lot for the channel. It helps get this out to a lot more people, and we put a lot of time and effort into making these videos, so if you guys do enjoy them, it really does mean a lot if you hit that like button. Of course, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We don't only cover the LEC on this channel. We're covering all 4 major regions as well as the NACL, so if you're interested in any League of Legends coverage, it's probably going to be on this channel, and I really, really appreciate you guys' support. But, of course, with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.